My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
This is Rob Long with Martini Shot for The Ankler. I once worked with a ferociously competitive, vaguely insane person who would fly into an angry depression every time he perceived that somebody else was doing okay in show business. And no, I'm not talking about myself. I'm not even really talking about a friend. It was just somebody I was working with. We had a project at a network, and when they ordered another project before ours, he needed to be talked down off a ledge. Now, the sequence of the series orders, I told him, had more to do with option dates than anything else. The other project had shot their pilot months before ours, so that option was obviously up much sooner. He didn't care. It just felt like a loss to him. But we want this other project to go, I said. We want this network to be in the comedy business. We want them to be making investments in comedy shows like ours. He didn't care. He wanted to be first. But we want them to go first, I said. This is a new kind of show for the network, and we want somebody else to soften up the field and break in a new audience pattern. He didn't care because in the trades, it looked like a failure, and he just couldn't or wouldn't see the good news. Now, I'm not sure who realized this first, but there are two kinds of people. I mean, yes, there are more than two kinds of people, but for this thing to work, we're going to have to just let some of my generalizations slide. And I know I've said a version of this before, but it is still very relevant, especially to this story. And, I'm a writer anyway, and most of what we do is just repurpose old material that we've used before, but we just didn't think got its due. So here's what I want to say again, that there are two kinds of people. There's the first kind. When they hear a knock on the door, they think, they're here. The second kind, when they hear a knock on the door, they think, they're here. And for a lot of us, we started out the first kind, but we're slowly realizing that we've turned into the second kind. We've turned into people who hear the knock on the door and instinctively think that this cannot be good. This cannot be fun. This cannot be something that I should be happy about. I wish there was a word to describe this feeling. There should be a word, right? English is the richest language by far. We have more words than any other, a result maybe of 1,000 years of blending and borrowing and importing and stealing words from all over. But there are some ideas and expressions, I guess, that we just don't have in our language. I've always been really interested in those and what we're missing. For instance, there's a word from Indonesia called didis. Now, didis means to search and pick out lice from one's own hair, usually when in bed at night. Actually, I'm kind of glad I never needed a word for that. Ameru is a Japanese word that means to seek affection through doing things like clinging or pleading, which describes every middle school romance that ever was, and a lot of other romances too. Guess we've all been there. Fingerspitzenfühl is a German word that means fingertips feeling, an intuitive feel, or to have one's finger on the pulse, even though it sounds like it could be the name of a fancy pastry or some kind of, kinky sex thing. Or both, I guess, because it's German after all. Cafuni is a Portuguese word that means tenderly running your fingers through your lover's hair, presumably when they're not busy with their didis. And all of these words came from a website called unoya.com that has a whole treasure box of words that don't really translate into English. But what it doesn't tell you, and what I guess I've, always wanted to know is how these words were invented. I suppose at some point in Japan, somebody was causing a romantic scene and begging and pleading and putting on an embarrassing spectacle, and somebody else watching it all unfold asked, do you think this is all going to work? Do you think this is attractive behavior, all of this Ameru? Again, we've all been there. Or maybe, however many centuries ago, some Indonesian parent heard noises from their teenage kid's room after bedtime and said, "What are you doing in there?" And the answer was a curt, surly Indonesian teenage answer. "Didis, okay? Am I allowed to do that? Or is this Nazi Germany?" in Indonesian, I guess. In Portugal, the same scene might have gone a different way. What are you doing in there? It better not be Kafuni. And these are all great words. And what's more, they're kind of fun to use, except perhaps for fingerspitzenfühl, which should only be spoken in Berlin, I think. But English is no slouch in the word coining Olympics. It's the most spoken language on earth when you consider both native speakers and non-native speakers. Such a globally distributed, diverse language group is going to keep inventing words to address a kaleidoscope of new situations. For example, there was a hurricane not that long ago in Florida where all the hurricanes happen, and thousands of telephone and power line repairmen headed to Florida to help get crucial services up and running for storm victims. Now, they're called linemen, and as anybody who's familiar with Glenn Campbell's 1968 hit Wichita Lineman can tell you, it's a lonely and sometimes, I guess romantic job. Now, a few days after the brigades of out-of-state linemen arrived in Florida, single women in the area were posting TikTok videos with snapshots of hot linemen on the job. Some even posted screenshots of linemen profiles from dating sites. And there were enough of these posts to give rise to a new subcategory, I guess, on the TikTok app called Lineman TikTok. And inevitably, of course, some of those photos and screenshots were seen by people who knew the lineman from back home. So some, unhappily, were even married to a few of those linemen. So lineman TikTok exploded with angry recriminations, and the wives of the linemen posted tough-talking threats. No Amero here, that's for sure. And the local Florida women responded with taunts and trash talk. And in that cauldron of jealousy and possessive bitterness, a new compound noun was born. Bucket bunny. Listen up, ladies, the wife of a lineman posted to her TikTok page, pronouncing the word ladies as if, she meant the opposite of ladies. When he's done fixing your power lines, my man is coming home. To me. You hear? To me. I am not worried about any of y'all bucket bunnies. Now, I'm ashamed that at the time I had to look this up. The trucks that linemen drive have these telescoping arms that can carry them to the top of the utility pole in a plastic man-sized bucket. They're called bucket trucks, so it's only logical that a woman chasing a man in a bucket truck would be called a bucket bunny. Maybe you remember this? It was kind of news a few years ago. Now, the reason I remember it is because a few days later, I read something in the trades about someone selling a project based on the idea of Lineman TikTok, which sounded great at the time and felt like a project that we'd all be seeing soon, at the time. And I think there was even a writer and a piece of talent attached to the whole project. Again, at the time. Now, if that project got made or aired, I never saw it. In fact, I never heard of it again after that first mention. And there should be a word to describe that too, the slow disappearance from entertainment business media and lunchtime conversations of a project that was announced with a lot of excitement and jealous anticipation. Put it this way, we need a word to describe the feeling you get when you open the trades and see that someone has sold a project like bucket bunnies because someone else was keeping their ear to the ground and picking up signs from the zeitgeist, someone with great fingerspitzenfühl. And then we need a word to describe the sudden, nasty, pleasurable twitch you get when you all of a sudden remember that project years later and discover that it never went anywhere. And then we all need a word to describe the feeling we should be having, especially now when it seems like no one is making anything anywhere. And the one conversation we all seem to be having at lunch and on the phone and in texts is, there's no work. Will there ever be work? And then we read that someone somehow sold something, lineman of TikTok, someone else's show on the network that you're waiting to hear from, doesn't matter. Because it means that there's movement somewhere. We need a word to describe the feeling of putting your professional jealousy aside and hoping that the show you just read about is going to get made. It's going to be a big hit, and it's going to be the pair of jumper cables the television business needs to get roaring back. It's probably a word close to ameru, the Japanese begging and pleading, but we can keep working on it. And that's it for this week. Next week, we will come up with a system never to get fired. For The Ankler, this is Rob Long.